Here to discuss the Mo Farah story and its ramifications is sports blogger Laurence McKenna. Laurence, welcome. Just tell me about the mechanism of what's happened here with the doping, etc.
Well, it's an interesting one in the first place, I think, for a lot of people in journalism and then in sport itself, and the understanding of what actually happens during a doping test. Some people are tested through urine, some people are tested through blood, and for top athletes, that's actually quite a regular occurrence. Some people saying that they can be tested up to 20 times a year, interestingly.
Wow.
Other people saying it can be as low as 3. Obviously, if you're winning things like Mo Farah did, then you're more likely to be tested, especially because you're a winner. If you set new world records, etc., you're more likely to be tested. And basically, throughout the year, athletes are pretty much tied down to telling the doping community where they're going to be, and basically very, very specific information about the times they're going to be able to get hold of them, those sorts of things. And they basically have to give a sample if they're asked to. And in this case, he missed 2 times, which isn't an irregular thing. And that's the point, is we've drawn a line here between someone doping and someone missing a drugs test, and there's a big gap between the two.
Huge difference, isn't there? I mean, one of the key things is that we've heard lots of athletes coming out today in support of Mo Farah, sort of saying how normal this is, in effect. One of the key ones is Britain's Kelly Southern. Now, she has come out and said, look, I've missed them before, and in actual fact, there were 9 other British Olympic athletes who missed 2 doping tests in the lead-up to the Olympic Games. That sort of put this in context, doesn't it? Exactly.
He's broken no rules here, essentially. 3 strikes and you're out, 2 and you're still fine. And the point is that he protested innocence, and I think for that reason we should probably be looking to what Mo is saying. The important thing is that there are people still backing him, and there is a story to be told here, but it's more about the rules and making sure that people are aware of those.
Joining me now to discuss more of today's top stories, it's sports blogger and all-round good guy, Laurence McKenna. It was in the script, I had to read it.
But only in the script, yeah.
No, it's entirely true, my friend. Let's start with the Copa America, and just what a shock this is for Brazil to be beaten by Colombia for the first time in 24 years.
History indicates it's a shock, but you'd say this Colombia side is actually very strong. I know that they only scrambled a goal in, but in the end, Dunga's team aren't always known for playing the best football and not the most Brazilian of football. He's trying to reform a side again, which is still very much built around Neymar, which confusingly is built around Neymar because of what Dunga stood for in the past, team ethics, building from the back and trying to make a system which works for Brazil. But they've too often deferred to Neymar within this tournament, and now they can't do that again.
But they're so desperate for flair as well, the Brazilians, aren't they, that I suppose he doesn't have a lot of choice. He has one phenomenal, outstanding attacking talent. He sort of has to build it around him, doesn't he?
Well, it's a strange one, isn't it? Because actually there are a number of technically gifted players at the tournament, especially within the Brazil team. And just because you're known for being solid at the back doesn't mean that you can't contrast that with some flair out on the pitch. There's been plenty of skills shown by this Brazilian team in the past. And really, it's just there's A, a media focus on Neymar, and B, I think more of a personal focus from him, because he is a star player for Brazil. The worry is that there's a lot of weight on his shoulders, and that showed.
Well, you mentioned that you don't feel that he should be the pivotal point in the team. He's not going to be now. He's just been sent off. So Dunga has his work to do, and as you've said, that may suit Dunga's style.
Yeah, I mean, at least there that almost takes a monkey off his back in a sense. But you worry that they're going to deflate in a similar way to the way they did in the previous tournament, especially where they sit in their group, the fact they're on the same points. It does leave them in an interesting situation.
It's a slightly weird one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's move on to the FIFA candidate, because this actually is a really big story, isn't it? For Musability to come out and say, right, I'm an African, I'm standing, I believe that Africa should now have the power in world football, the biggest job in world football, and I also believe I've got the votes. That's a big statement, and you'd think other people that were thinking of coming out and running against him might now be thinking, whoa, Nelly, hang on a second.
Well, there's been big power shifts in this time, and I think a lot of people have acknowledged that within FIFA there's probably one system, within the real world there's another system, and some people are very good at working one and not so much the other. Rightly, there is more emphasis towards Africa now because the size of continent it is, because of the importance it's currently playing within world football and the way that it's growing. And maybe this is the right time for him to move forward and out of the darkness of the huge shadow cast by Blatter and such other guys in the past. But the question
would certainly be a change, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, but the question is, does the system work in the first place? And, if maybe for the greater good he's moving forward and the system works for him, then that's a good thing. But, I was on the show just a few weeks ago, and we were saying how maybe the system world football, but makes it more geared towards a fairer system, not only for Africa, but for everyone else within FIFA.
I think, given there's plenty of time for candidates to still declare, my suspicion is that by the time the voting comes round, there'll be more than just 2 names on the cheat sheet.
It's going to be a good Christmas, let's put it that way.
We're looking forward to it. Let's talk about the Women's World Cup, because Brazil, really, they're on fire, aren't they? They're 100% record now. They look unbeatable at this point.
Yeah, there's a lot of other talented teams at this tournament. Really got to a point where they've been particularly challenged, if you like. We're barely out of the group stages. We're into the final 16, and there are some real challenging ties in there. I mean, England have got their tie, Germany have got theirs, Brazil themselves face a challenge. So it's going to be interesting to see in the quarterfinals more how those guys measure up against each other, because the group stages we sorted the wheat from the chaff. Now we're at the point where it gets serious. This is knockout football. I wonder how this Brazilian team will cope in this one.
You're absolutely right. This is the point that it gets interesting, but it would be remiss of us not to just quickly touch on South Korea beating Spain, because what a result for them. 1-0 down at half-time to come back for 2 glorious goals as well for the South Koreans. I don't think anyone saw that coming. Well,
especially not the Spanish. The Spanish don't seem to see themselves beaten in any sport right now, and I imagine that is partly why South Korea is doing so well. I mean, we saw in the Copa America as well, the fact that the underdog mentality, or the mentality that you want to beat, one of the sides that is a leading power in world football, essentially, is a real motivating factor within a tournament.
Yeah, and they have a terrific team ethic as well. Let's talk about this transfer saga that just seems to be going on and on and on. I know the transfer window hasn't properly opened yet, but nonetheless, I feel like we've talked about this boy so often, and we probably will continue to do so. Raheem Sterling, Manchester City came back with a package worth £40 million, and Liverpool said, we want more.
Yeah, this is an interesting clash of cultures between the Dubai, essentially, owned Man City and the American-owned Liverpool. And we're going to see whether one side comes out on top or the other does. And I think 50 million is a lot of money. But when you look at the way that FSG operate within the American market, the way that a lot of teams operate within an American market, they're probably right to hold out. Like you say, we've not even opened the transfer window yet. There's no money flying out or flying in. But there are people already trying to make their moves. The question is, would it really benefit Raheem Sterling to go to Man City?
It's a good point. Liverpool are in the situation where they've got a player who wants away, and they literally are just holding on for as much money as they can, sold to the highest bidder. Raheem Sterling is probably going to have something to say in it as well, but at this stage, it feels to me like Manchester City are trying to make this a one-horse race. Only one option for you, Raheem. We've offered more money than anyone else is going to. No one can match us, type thing.
I also wonder whether there are other sides kind of waiting in the wings, looking at how it plays out for Man City, where they're going to, put their horse in the race, if you like. If Man City push to 40 and Liverpool still say no, I imagine that does cast a number of teams out of the race. You also think now they've seen the problems that his agent and the player causes themselves.
OK, great stuff, Laurence. Really appreciate it. We'll see you again in the second half. Well, joining us again to discuss more of today's stories is sports blogger Laurence McKenna. Welcome back, Laurence. Let's touch quickly first on Andy Murray, who is just looking dominant at a place that he loves to play at Queen's.
Well, that's part of it, isn't it? It's almost feeling like home at this point for him. And I think certainly within the current climate as well, it's nice to see the way that Andy is conducting himself in the media as well, and I think also the way the media are treating him. We've seen a lot of people speaking over the last week, Roger Federer, etc., being called out by a number of people for the relations with other players, and I think Andy's pretty much just building on his own tennis at the moment. That's really nice to see.
He's enjoying it. I think he's had 11 victories in his last 12 matches. So he's on fire.
Well, the one loss obviously being pretty key in there. So,
that was a shame.
Yeah.
We'll move on from that quickly. Let's talk about Formula One. Now, these are strong words from Mark Webber, and some people have said, well, he's only saying what a lot of people have been thinking recently, that Formula One needs a revamp, that it's looking a little stale, that the cars need to be faster, more exciting to drive. What do you think?
There's only so far you can build, of course. I mean, you can actually get cars to go faster, obviously, but there is actually only so far fast a car can go before it becomes extremely dangerous for the driver. You do wonder whether it's also about building on perception, where F1 have built their perception of the sport, who they've marketed themselves to, the audiences, the wider audiences, whether they've managed to build outside of that, and whether they've really been not family-friendly, but just friendly towards a wider audience who maybe don't know so much or take such an intense interest in the sport, and because of the amount of money surrounding it, sometimes they've built themselves into a bit of a corner, to be honest.
Well, Webber has kind of said, look, they need to look at sports like soccer and MotoGP, which are really, really exciting, edge of your seat from the minute the action starts right the way through to the end. He's sort of suggesting that Formula One, after you've seen, you know, the first lap, gets a little bit processional sometimes.
Well, yes. Partly. I also think that's because of the structure of the teams at the moment, the way that you know, the talent is all concentrated in certain areas. But that's not always been the nature of the sport. It has always been competitive to some extent. But with people having combinations of people who could both win the World Championship, and therefore there being a different element of competition within there, we're seeing the structure of the sport slightly change at the moment. So I see what he's saying, but at the same time, I think he has to acknowledge that if the coverage improves and you have more knowledge and you build people's knowledge as fans, you're probably going to get more interest.
I mean, ultimately, if you're a petrol head, you still love your F1, surely.
Yeah, although I have seen a few people disenchanted more recently within the community. I just think people, like you say, finding it a little bit stale. But again, if you're a journalist and you find it stale, then that's part of your responsibility to cover it in a slightly more entertaining way.
Last one for you, and it's literally a one-word answer. Yeah. Jordan Henderson, the cover boy for FIFA 16.
Yes. Absolutely.
You're feeling that?
Yeah, of course. I feel sorry for him. Of course, if it had been the other way around, if Courtois got voted to the top, Liverpool fans would have been outraged, someone else would have been outraged, and that would have been a story in itself. It's someone looking for copy, isn't it?
Magic. Thank you. Lovely to see you again. I hope to see you again very soon.